Quality programming on KET is brought to you by viewers like you and Brown-Forman, producer and marketer of premium adult beverages, headquartered in Louisville and selling its brands in more than 170 countries across the globe. Brown-Forman, proud Kentucky citizen since 1870. Leadership Kentucky, offering 4 programs creating a statewide network for established leaders and young professionals, as well as new leaders to the Commonwealth. Nominations and applications now open. 502-695-1102 or lky@leadershipky.org.
Midwife calling.
Hello, Nurse Franklin. Long time no see.
Call the Midwife is back.
No one's higher up in the nuns' fan club than me.
Amen.
They are the best of the East End.
I will go where I am summoned.
I'm so glad you've asked for help.
May I introduce your daughter?
She's beautiful.
Sunday, 8, 7 Central on KET.
Enjoy KET programs and services? Show your support with an automatic ongoing monthly contribution of $10, $20, $50 or more. Sustaining membership is an easy and affordable way to provide reliable, ongoing support that helps KET deliver the programs that matter to you and your community. Become a sustaining member today at ket.org/sustain or 1-800-866-0366. Thank you for watching and supporting KET.
The American identity begins when Benjamin Franklin knit the American colonies together.
Franklin is endlessly interesting.
Printer, scientist, revolutionary.
He is the only founding father who evidently had a sense of humor.
His vision is broader than the American Revolution.
The things that he spoke of, that he wrote about, had a certain amount of power.
He really was an American genius.
Benjamin Franklin starts Monday, April 4th on PBS and the PBS app.
KET, where learning comes to life. Weather in Kentucky is sometimes extreme and sometimes dangerous. Being unprepared when severe weather strikes can be deadly for you and your family. What do you need to know to stay safe? Welcome to Severe Weather, Staying Safe.
Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Chris Allen, TV and weather radio veteran from Bowling Green. Tonight we will be discussing the recent historic tornadoes and severe storms that ravaged parts of Kentucky on December 10th and 11th. And in this program, you're going to see the devastating impact of this outbreak and how it affected Kentucky communities and how those communities responded and how they are recovering. More importantly, we are going to help you prepare for what's next. Joining me in the studio this evening are John Brogan, Federal Coordinating Officer for FEMA, Michael Kochasik, Warning Coordination Meteorologist for the Louisville National Weather Service, Michael Dossett, Kentucky Director of Emergency Management, retired, and joining us via Skype is Tracy Warner, the Emergency Manager for Graves County, which includes the city of Mayfield. And thank you all for joining me this evening and for this, and especially Tracy, who is joining us from where some of the worst of the tornadoes happened on the night of December 10th and 11th, and she's going to chime in here via Skype in a couple of minutes. But first, let's open the show this evening with what everybody has been talking about now for 3 months. It's only been 3 months. For a lot of us, it feels like it was just yesterday. But Michael, from the National Weather Service standpoint, that night was a classic setup, meteorologically speaking, of what we call a nocturnal event, a nighttime event. And we historically know that those nighttime events in this part of the country is deadly.
Absolutely. So when tornadoes happen at that time of night, it's hard because you can't see them. And it's dark, and unless there's lightning to illuminate some of the monsters that we saw that night, People are going to bed and turning off the TV sometimes, and that's why it's really important to have multiple ways to receive warnings, especially when you're talking about these nighttime events like this.
When everyone from, especially the Paducah office, which you share communication with, and I was online that night and in the chat room noticing that Paducah was starting to say, with what we call the tagging of the bulletins that were coming out, they were tagging these as confirmed. Mm-hmm. And it was just one after the other. Usually you'll see a tornado warning and it would say radar indicated or severe thunderstorm warning, tornado might happen. But every one of these that were coming out were saying confirmed. That's scary.
It is scary, and it's something that you don't see too often, especially for nighttime setups like this. But the radar signatures were there. There was something we call debris balls, where the radar can tell that there's not a consistent signature there that you usually see with a raindrop or a snowflake, that kind of thing that it usually looks for. So there was definitely a debris ball where it had hit something, and we knew that it was being lofted into the atmosphere, and that helps us confirm the tornado. Plus, numerous reports. I mean, this storm was together, the parent supercell was together for 8 hours and crossed 350 miles, and there was a break in there between the tornado, but at one point when it touched down just south of the Kentucky-Tennessee border through when it ended near Rough Falls, Kentucky, you're talking 165, 166 miles. I mean, that's just incredible. That's the longest track in Kentucky history. So, yeah, it's just something incredible that is just a monster and historic for something we'll be talking about for years to come.
And look at that graphic. I mean, the graphics that we've got up there, that one is showing radar imagery taken, every 5 minutes?
This one here is about every 15 to 20, just so
Okay.
it looks nice on the map, so you can kind of differentiate the storm track. But yes, in real time, you would be seeing updates from the National Weather Service every 4 to 5 minutes.
Right. That's phenomenal. I mean, that kind of track in this part of the country, 8 hours it took? For that track, 350 miles, started in Arkansas, clipped the Boot Heel of Missouri, and then went through western Kentucky and then northward. That's an incredible time for one tornado to stay on the ground.
Absolutely, and this is something that you would see usually in Oklahoma or
Right.
somewhere out in Tornado Alley, but not Kentucky. It's just absolutely incredible. And then the time of year, too, is very anomalous. You're talking December. That's traditionally one of our quieter months for tornadoes in Kentucky's climate history. And we had this outbreak, and it's just incredible. We had 20 tornadoes that night, 21 actually, 3 in western Kentucky, of course the big one with Mayfield, and then we had 18 different ones in central Kentucky. So just an unbelievable night to have that happen in December.
Yeah, if we could put that graphic back up again that shows the strength of those tornadoes. There were several that were EF2, EF3, EF4, and it was 2 separate paths. Because I'm in Bowling Green, the EF3 that came through there was early in the morning, like 20 minutes after 1 Central Time. And I was on the radio covering it live, and it was only 2 streets over from where the radio station is, and I felt like we had been hit. I mean, even that a few blocks away was that kind of impact, and it just felt like that I was just surprised to be able to come out of it and, I'm still here, because I thought that was it. But then I get out and I look 2 streets or 2 blocks over to where it went right down the bypass, and just could not believe the devastation, and that something that big and that impactful had hit right in the middle of Bowling Green. And there's the bypass, if you want to see some of the footage, right after December 11th, the next day or so. That's some of the damage, and a lot of that damage is still there. And just the significance of that area, and Mayfield and Dawson Springs and other communities that were affected are never going to look the same as they did. That's where the real impact kind of hits home.
Absolutely. It's unfortunate. These folks will be cleaning up and rebuilding their lives for years to come. And folks at home don't usually see that. They see the event and they see the cleanup, within the week or two, but it goes much deeper than that for a long time. And it's just absolutely devastating when one of these happens, especially at night, and just goes to show the importance of having ways to receive warnings, especially when the power goes out or you don't have your cell phone battery charged up. And
right.
We have wireless emergency alerts these days, and they save countless lives. But it's very important to have multiple ways to receive warnings just in case one of your systems, fail.
Yes, more than one way. We always say that. Director Dossett, looking at that footage of the damage, you get the initial first call. What is the response? What gets activated when you hear of something like maybe on the receiving end you're hearing Mayfield has been wiped out? We do mean wiped out. What do you do?
Having been downrange and certainly Tracy can talk about some of this. Video and pictures don't do it justice. It will take your breath away, literally. We knew it was bad, and quite frankly, we were at a level 4 risk level, which is unheard of in Kentucky. That rarely occurs.
Yes.
So we were on high alert. As soon as the first indication that we had taken a hit, we activated to level 3, and we eventually went up to level 1, which is, for Kentucky, the highest level that we have reached since the ice storm of 2009. We've never gone to that level previously. And I can't talk about this event without, once again, sharing our thoughts and prayers for the 80 families who lost loved ones, our citizens in Kentucky that perished during the event. But we immediately saw, as Mike indicated, there were radar-indicated debris patterns. We had obviously received strikes. The governor came to the EOC in the early morning hours, and we communicated via Skype and Zoom and whatever we could leverage with county officials and with EM directors, and looked at what we believed was the case. We worked through the night with emergency response units. Again, hats off to our first responders in all of these counties. Yes. And, Mayfield and Dawson Springs and Bowling Green were 3 of the hardest hit, but there were many, many other areas. And it was interesting for Mike to point out there were 21 tornadoes in that event during that 8-hour period, just in Kentucky alone. Again, the largest tornado event ever in Kentucky's history and the most devastating. So we activated very quickly. We notified our federal partners, obviously, at the watch desk. Gracia Sheck is our FEMA Region 4 administrator, and we got all of the parts and the pieces moving very quickly.
And it was one of those events to where at first your mind cannot comprehend what has just happened. And then when the light of day comes around the next morning and you see this devastation, what we're looking at right here on video, it's like Michael said, you think it's Kansas or Nebraska or Iowa or someplace in the plains, because that's more typical of what we see around here. And frankly, Michael, you may agree or disagree to this, but really in the past few years, we've been somewhat dormant as far as tornado outbreaks in Kentucky. And so it's been a while since we've seen anything of this magnitude. And as Director Dossett pointed out, this now ranks even over the 74 super outbreak. This is bigger than that as far as the impact, the cost of the disaster in the multi-millions, the 80 lives that we lost here in Kentucky, and just the sheer magnitude of this. Could have anybody really been prepared for this, or is this one of those things when you get tornadoes so big and cover so much of a wide path and a long path? Is there much that you can do to change that?
Planning ahead is key to any disaster that you could face, and tornadoes is no different. Having multiple ways to receive those warnings and also an emergency plan. to know where you would go, especially for folks that were in mobile homes. We saw plenty of those that were completely,
lots of them,
destroyed, thrown for half a mile or more, and it didn't end so well for some folks. And having a good plan in place for where to go should this happen, and it will happen. It's only a matter of time before it happens in our backyard, some communities, Lexington, Louisville, Frankfort, anywhere, and Bowling Green, Mayfield, and other communities surrounding. It was their turn. And there's not much if you can do if it's coming for you in that moment, but ahead of time is key to planning, that if something like this happens, to know where you're going to go and to do it. Don't hem-haw and wait around. We saw several stories when we were out storm surveying with people saying, I got the warning, but I didn't think it was going to be this bad. And when warnings are issued, it's important to take heed of it, and do something. And, because seconds can matter, minutes can matter between life and death.
And this is something we face when we've done this show in years past. We've talked about that, about it has always come down to trying to get people to take this seriously and to understand that even if you're not in the direct path of the storm, you still need to be concerned and you need to be prepared. If there's a watch, that means you need to watch. You need to be, the time to plan is not as it's coming toward you. The time to plan is on those quiet days when you've got your family together and you work out a plan. And I know, John, you'll talk more about this when we talk more about FEMA and preparedness. But I want to get Tracy Warner in here from really at the heart of this disaster. Tracy, again, thank you for joining us from Mayfield and Graves County. I mean, our hearts go out to everybody there because when we heard what had happened in Mayfield with the devastation right through the middle of town, we just couldn't believe what we were hearing.
It was hard for me to believe because driving through town, you don't even know where you're at. It's still hard to believe that it happened. But we are moving forward and things are getting cleaned up. It is a slow process and, hopefully we'll get back. But, I want to say on this storm, I think the job that the National Weather Service provided for us that night, because it did stay on the ground for so long, I think their job, the local weather service channels and stuff, that they done a great job preparing people, because if it wasn't for them putting messages out there like this is going to be bad, I think we would have had more deaths. We ended up losing 24 total. And so, but I do think that our numbers, looking at the damage that we had, would have been a lot higher had we have not gotten enough warnings ahead of time. And so normally, tornadoes don't stay on the ground this long, and people don't have this much time to get to a shelter and stuff. And so I do think the warnings help. And because of that, I think it did save lives. So,
Tracy, what was your first reaction when you were getting word from obviously where you are, you would get your information and bulletins from the Paducah National Weather Service office. What was your first reaction when you were hearing that not only are there warnings, but these were confirmed tornadoes that were headed directly for you?
When they actually called me and said that it was going to be catastrophic. Oh. I started calling. We have 10 volunteer fire departments and then one paid. So I started calling the chiefs and letting them know to get their guys ready, that it was going to be bad. The tornado had kind of shifted a little bit, was going to go north, which was actually going to hit the area that I live in. So started calling family and letting them know. And out of all the years that I've been alive, I don't think I've ever had my parents take shelter. And this was probably the first time that they've ever actually gotten to the bathroom. And so they done that. And then it shifted again and was coming right towards Mayfield, which my daughter was at the nursing home. They got hit. And so I texted her and said, it's going to be bad. And then, of course, my husband's a fire chief, and his volunteer fire station was completely destroyed. But luckily, he was out in a truck and with my other daughter. So they were out to respond. I just try to get everybody ready and prepared. But when, the National Weather Service was saying where it was going to come in at, I called the sheriff and told him, and he wanted to know what road it was going to come in at. And so he sent 2 officers there, and they got hit. I mean, they were right in the middle of it. And on the National Weather Service, I typed it in. I was like, I've got 2 officers that are, heavily damaged vehicles. They're in the middle of the storm, and just hearing them on the radio, I can still hear them hollering, saying that they've been in direct path of the storm. So from that point, it seemed like it went by very fast. And then the call that I got next was my daughter saying that their nursing home had hit. So
wow. Well, your entire family and your family of first responders were all right there in the thick of it. I can only imagine how that was for you. Thank you so much for and stand by, because we're going to come back to you. But thank you for giving us that firsthand account. And Director, I know that this is what they train for, but I mean, to have someone at ground zero in that type of situation, and obviously she responded beautifully in that chaos. This is what they train for, but still, it's just like, to hear the account of what happened is really just heart-wrenching.
You're right, Chris, and I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank Tracy, Judge Perry, Mayor Onan, the fire chief, police chief, everybody on the ground that night. This is a one-of. This is a one-of for Kentucky. Mm-hmm. It's a one-of in their lives, and they performed exactly as they were trained. No one expects it ever to be this bad, but they're a shining example. Along with all the first responders in the other counties, we eventually declared 23 counties. And Tracy and all the folks in Mayfield are a shining example of how bad it can get and how it's done right. They did a remarkable job. This is a take your breath away event.
Yeah, I mean, you see the footage there from Mr. Westerfield, who sent up his drone, went around. That's the courthouse in Mayfield. I mean, we're talking direct hit downtown.
Picture says it all.
It's really, when you take that into account, small town in western Kentucky, people going about their lives each and every day. They go to the courthouse, get their driver's license, get, clerk records and all this kind of stuff, pay their taxes, the bank across the street, doing business there. And to see all of that just in shambles in a matter of seconds is, for those folks and for everybody watching, I know that this made national news because it was such an impact. John, from FEMA, I know that, once the Weather Service predicted what was coming, said, here it is, and then we get emergency management activated, and then we know the next part of this process is response and recovery, and FEMA steps in and says, okay, now we need to take a look at these affected areas, and here are people that are going to need help for weeks, maybe months.
Yeah, and I think it's telling that Tracy and Director Dossett talked first, because we have a saying in emergency management that all disasters start and end local.
Yes.
And so it's Tracy and all of her team, first responders, and Mike and his team stood up there at State EOC. FEMA was obviously aware, as Mike said, he talked to the region, so we went to bed that night. We actually had staff here in Kentucky working a previous event, and so I went to bed that night here in Lexington, just a few blocks away from here, knowing that there was a possibility that something bad was going to happen overnight. And I got a text from Mike's deputy at 4 a.m. About Mayfield that indicated that, yes, indeed, something very, very bad did happen and something tragic happened. So FEMA immediately stepped up. I was in the EOC, I think. I had to wait for the storms to pass because they were overhead, and I couldn't even get into the EOC until the weather passed over Lexington. But I was there right away. We had an emergency declaration from the president within less than 12 hours. I mean, it was very quick. We had an emergency declaration. So now what that did was allow federal resources to be freed up and to include urban search and rescue teams, which went to the candle factory as well as some other places in Mayfield and Graves County, food, commodity, those sorts of contributions. And it's important that, FEMA steps in, but we take our directions from our state and local partners. We're there to support. And so we immediately had staff on the ground that day. The following day, that Sunday, 2 days later, we had a major presidential declaration, also very, very quick. And that freed up those resources to provide assistance to individuals and individual assistance program, public assistance, and a lot of other programs. And so, FEMA moved very quickly, as fast as we could. I don't know if I've ever seen FEMA move this fast. Within less than a week, we had hundreds of staff here in Kentucky, downrange, not just here in Frankfort and Lexington, but down in the affected area, registering survivors, trying to assist with shelters, urban search and rescue teams, delivering commodities, but all up the direction of those local and state officials.
Yeah, and you're looking at some of the photos of the response from FEMA in those affected areas, and it wasn't only just these agencies, but there were others. The American Red Cross, obviously, Salvation Army, United Way. There were so many others that jumped right in. In fact, I had heard, and I can't remember the exact source, but we had so many people from city, county officials in Bowling Green, Warren County, even some other areas come in, radio and television, and some were from out of town, and they would say that they have been to other places, other disasters, and they have never seen this kind of remarkable reaction from everybody, and even residents and business owners that have been affected were pitching in and saying, hey, do you need this? I've got a backhoe digger over here. I've got a cherry picker over here. I've got saws. I've got tools, whatever you need. And it was really remarkable how everybody just pitched in and said, how can I help?
And that's still happening.
Yeah, it's still happening.
We still have volunteer agencies
really
out there
is.
doing exactly that. 90 days later, they're still out there active.
And I might add, John is one of those. John went through Joplin and made the comment that this is some of the worst he's seen, and John worked that disaster for quite a while. I will also tell you what you saw is Kentuckians helping Kentuckians, and that was the bright spot. Being down there, and of course, as everyone knows, President Biden visited the area, along with Secretary Mayorkas and Administrator Deanna Criswell of FEMA, all to show support. And we got some of the quickest reactions in Region 4 history, talking to my colleagues in the other 9 states. We had an emergency disaster declaration on the Saturday. On the Sunday, as John indicated, we had an expedited major declaration. We got the first 6 counties for direct federal assistance. Then we went to 16 for individual assistance, and finally 23 counties. So it was a remarkable outpouring of federal assistance. And when you join that with the local and the state assistance, you have a team partnership that is still on the ground today.
Yeah.
It is very noteworthy.
It is. And John, maybe for the people at home that are watching who don't have a good grasp on how this works, they keep hearing about disaster declaration, the DR. Yep. Everything is assigned a number after the president says this area is going to be designated as a disaster area eligible for funding to help people recover and rebuild and whatnot. But just kind of, give us the short version of the process when you guys are activated to come to a Bowling Green or a Mayfield or Dawson Springs or wherever you're set up. Tell us how that process works and what people need to remember to do next time something like this happens, and then they're prepared for it.
Sure. And so, to Mike's point, this happened very, very quickly. This normally doesn't happen this fast. A a lot of times that is an event happens, and you see events that happen all the time that are handled at the local level, the state level, and FEMA and feds never get involved. But when it looks like the event is overwhelms the state's capacity, whether that be on the response side, or sometimes it may take a couple weeks when they realize on the recovery side this is going to be beyond their capacity. The governor of that state, tribe, or territory will request up to FEMA that we would like a major declaration. And FEMA would evaluate the disaster, the damages. Normally, they would do what we would call joint preliminary damage assessments. So for communities that go through something like that, if you hear the KYAM ask about you report your damages, be ready for that. When you go out there and do those joint preliminary damage assessments, that's when we evaluate what the level of damage is. Then there'll be a decision whether or not there's going to be a major declaration that gets declared. A federal coordinating officer gets appointed, and then they go to work with our state partners. And we, depending on the different categories, it could be public assistance, individual assistance, but different counties will get designated with certain criteria, and that determines whether they're going to have individual assistance, public assistance, and then we will direct our resources accordingly.
Well, let's talk about that response, because as we're looking at footage from Dawson Springs, and we can throw up some of the more recent footage from Bowling Green and Mayfield, because this is as you guys are there and you're assisting. There were a lot of people, I remember trying to answer questions on my radio show because people were calling in and saying, why can't I just have my debris hauled off? I don't understand why the Corps of Engineers has got to come out and they've got to see how much debris is there and all that. But it all works together with helping get those disaster relief funds back into the community. Explain that.
Exactly. And so there's certain, as with anything, there's regulations, and it's not a matter of saying that communities can't do something, but as you mentioned, Chris, it's those disaster funds, and wanting to make sure that those communities are able to access those disaster relief funds. So when it comes to debris, as I'm sure Tracy well knows, that is a kind of a complicated process, and you have to make sure that the debris, sometimes it's a matter of sorting it out to make sure that you're taking any hazardous debris out, any white debris, commercial debris, and tracking the load tickets and making sure that you're knowing where it's going, how much was hauled away. So when it comes time for those, and I mentioned public assistance, that's a perfect example. When it comes time for those communities to say we would like reimbursement for hauling all this debris away, we have that documentation. And you mentioned earlier what can communities do on the next time. It's keep that documentation. So if there is a declaration and FEMA comes in, you have that ready to go, and so we can provide you that reimbursement in a timely manner.
And I know, and John, I might add, just to put this in perspective, John explaining the process, in Graves County, in Mayfield alone, the estimate of debris removal is 2 million cubic yards. The overall for the impact area was about 4.5 million cubic yards of debris. 2 million alone in Mayfield. And the cost is enormous. The estimate's $120 million, so it's a massive, massive lift.
Yeah, let's bring Tracy back in here. Tracy, I know that you've been listening to some of this, and I know that if it's anything like Bowling Green, I haven't been to your town to see, but I've seen this footage and I've seen and heard of the impact of the tornado. You still have a lot of debris laying around there, don't you?
Yes, we do. It takes a little bit for people to get their insurance companies, involved and stuff. And that's one of the things that, we had insurance companies that were actually hit. So for them to have to relocate, and you were talking about earlier, the courthouses, the courthouse, the city hall, police station, fire station, EMS, all that stuff. We had to relocate everything, all our governmental offices and stuff. And so we've slowly, got those back open and stuff. And so, when you drive around there, it's good to see, some pictures of before and after of where the debris has been picked up. But there's still a lot out there. And it's a slow process. We are, we're moving in the right direction. We do have, there's steps you have to take and And unfortunately, there's a lot of paperwork, and you've got to make sure that it's all documented properly and stuff for the reimbursement process. And so we're trying to make sure that everything is done properly. And because we want, to make sure that we do get the reimbursements. And that's important because something like this could, have a really reverse effect on the community.
How are the people there, Tracy? You being from Graves County and that area, how are the people responding? I mean, do they understand the breadth and the depth and the scope of this disaster? And they're pretty much, we understand, we're going to be patient. I know there's some that probably are maybe just a little impatient with the paperwork and the steps you have to go through to make sure all of this stuff is recorded and to let these agencies and everyone else know what's going on. But overall, what's the temperament of the people in Mayfield?
I think people are getting frustrated. I mean, but we've got FEMA's got set up here to help people with, they get denial letters and stuff. And so they are working through the process. We're all getting burnt out. So I've still, been working my Saturdays and Sundays and stuff and trying to slow down a little bit and just trying to do my normal daily job stuff and having to deal with the disaster stuff. And so we're all getting a little bit, fatigued on it, but we'll come out stronger. It's just we're, trying to make the right decisions for a stronger tomorrow. And that's what a lot of people just have to understand, that the decisions we make today is going to affect our children's children in the future.
Well, that's well put. And John, we can't make these processes fast enough. It's with anything really. Once you're affected, you want something to be done, but you want it on your timetable. But unfortunately, things don't work that quickly, especially after a disaster of this magnitude. And you've got all these agencies and everybody working together, and volunteers and people that are putting in their time and effort. Some people working a regular job, and then if they're a first responder, they're volunteering on the fire department or ambulance service or whatever. And then when they find a little bit of time, they're helping somebody with cleanup. And then they're waiting for, when is the government going to do something? When am I going to get my relief and all this? But it is a process that takes a while.
And it is. And unfortunately, that's not comfort to folks to hear that it's a process. But I think, Tracy mentioned those letters, and that can be disheartening to someone who just went through a very traumatic event, and they get a letter saying that they're not eligible for FEMA funds or federal funds. But I want to make sure that the viewers at home understand FEMA wants to get it right. And Tracy made a comment about the decisions you make are going to affect our children's children. So we want to get it. We want to get this right, and that down to the individual level. So, if someone thinks FEMA got it wrong, whether it be with a letter, public assistance, it's important that they tell us, they contact us, they stay in contact, especially those individuals. Don't throw that letter away. That's not the final answer. Read the letter. Very oftentimes, it's something as simple as, maybe we need to see what their insurance paid for. FEMA can't duplicate benefits. So if someone has insurance, we can't duplicate that. It might be something as simple as two spouses both registered at the same time. And so that kind of flags something in our system. So a lot of times it can be something very simple that can be fixed if that individual contact FEMA, and we will work with them to get it right. We still have 3 disaster recovery centers open around the Commonwealth, one in Mayfield, Dawson Spring, and Bowling Green. So folks can actually go in person if they want to engage with FEMA, or they can call or visit the website.
Well, as the show is airing on the 14th, that's the last day for Bowling Green. Now, I don't know about the other centers, but
so that is the last day to register. However, if you haven't had a chance yet, by the time this airs and you see it, and all of a sudden the light bulb goes off, register. There's still a possibility that we can accept a late registration. There's always justification for late registration. Also, just because you might have had a letter doesn't mean you can't still appeal. You can still appeal past the 14th. again, we want to make sure it's not just the communities you want to make sure they get that reimbursement for. It's those individuals. If something happened and we got it wrong, and I personally have seen several cases where our staff in the field have engaged with a survivor who thought, hey, FEMA got this wrong, and it got fixed. And so it can, I know it's discouraging, but we want to get it right and we want to work with you, but we need you to work with us, especially if there's missing documentation or some questions we need answered, and we'll do our very best to make that right.
And Director, I know that your local EMs are working in every county to help in this regard. I mean, a lot of them already have connections not only to FEMA, but to local agencies like United Way, American Red Cross, United Way, that they can be put in the right direction and try to get some assistance, or at least for someone who's like, I tried to do this, I tried to do that, it didn't work, what should I do? I mean, your EMs are trained to know where to send people to help them.
They are, and you know, Tracy brought up a good point. We are now at the 90-day mark. Mm-hmm. There's frustration everywhere, and it's noted, and people typically need to work through that, and there are avenues that assist, and I for one can tell you that there is no moratorium on bad things happening. Mm-hmm. But this is a resilient community, and these are resilient counties, as you can see with Tracy and Mayfield. Dawson Springs was hit as hard and maybe suffered more being a smaller community, and we can move on down the line. The great thing is, and you pointed it out, our VOED services are still there. The volunteer services, both faith-based and nonprofit, are still there. Our EM directors on the ground have been remarkable in directing those to services. It is frustrating, and we can sympathize with the frustration. It's always going to be a hard road. The good thing is we're not going to work into long-term recovery. There's a survey that if you go into KY.gov, there's a survey where our survivors can register for other services. We've had a lot of talk about non-congregate sheltering, and the governor started a travel trailer program for survivors that qualify. That survey will take you to other areas that, as John indicated, maybe FEMA assistance wasn't available in this area, but there's cabinet assistance through state government that may help folks. So it's a time of frustration. The government can never move quick enough, and I, for one, wish we could all move faster. But the services are still out there, and they're not going away. As we all know, this is not a recovery in months. This is a recovery in years, and it'll be a long time bringing our communities back. And it's a holistic community effort that will do it.
Well, I know that we've all taken that step back and maybe did a little bit of armchair quarterbacking. And I know a lot of people in our communities have, saying, well, they should have done this, they should have done that. And that's going to be with any response. And that's going to be with any disaster. But overall, we're on the right path, and we see the future ahead, and we see how recovery, you know, and Director, that you said this, it's about our communities and about the strength of those communities and how we respond as just people. You know, we can't always depend on an agency being at the right place at the right time, exactly when we need them. But it takes every one of us to be able to just check on a neighbor or just check on a friend or family and make sure that we're all okay in these kind of disasters, big or small. It's what it takes. And that brings me to the final part of our program, preparedness and mitigation. And I know that in the years of working with FEMA and with Kentucky Emergency Management and the National Weather Service in different projects about getting people to be ready for these events. John, I know that you have your ready.gov. You have so many valuable tools to use, that people can use. And by the way, we've got a link to all of that on the KET website. We're going to put up that information here. But we want people to take advantage of the things that have been made available to them. But as I said at the beginning of the program, we don't want them to wait until they hear a tornado watch comes out or a flood watch or whatever. It's too late then. We need people, while the weather is quiet, to get them activated into engaging in this.
And it's interesting you say while the weather is quiet in Kentucky, because I think we've had maybe 1 week since the tornadoes where we actually didn't have any weather events. We have another snow event coming in Friday. So that just reinforces the importance of that. And, who would have thought we would have had a long trek EF4 tornado on December 10th.
Before Christmas.
You don't think it happens when you least expect it.
Everyone was planning for Christmas. No, they weren't thinking about tornadoes.
Exactly. There's never disasters don't happen at an opportune time that's convenient. I mean, they just happen. You can't stop them. So, the ready.gov it's got a lot of great resources on there. A weather radio is something that everyone in this part of the country should have. I live in Kansas City, Missouri. We have a weather radio in our house. Just having that, download the FEMA app. It can give you kind of a lot of good information on your smartphone too. Think about what you need to do to prepare. So even if you think you're not in a high risk area, something that might happen, the next town over could affect your well-being. Maybe you lose power. Maybe you lose access to groceries. Do you have enough food to get by for 3 days? Flood insurance is a big thing too. A lot of times people don't think, well, I don't live in a high risk zone. Well, a high percentage of folks that actually are affected by floods don't live in a high risk zone. So check with your local insurance. See about a flood insurance policy that could really save a lot of angst if a flood event does happen. And we're in Kentucky, so a flood event's probably going to happen at some point. And those NFIP policies, they don't need a presidential declaration. Those are insurance policies. Those are for peace of mind for those folks. So I definitely want to encourage folks, visit the website, talk to your local emergency managers. KYAM's got great things on their site as well. There's a wealth of information out there for folks. I'd also put one more plug in if folks are in the area with our disaster recovery centers. We have mitigation staff in those disaster recovery centers. So if someone wants to go visit one of our disaster recovery centers, staff there can help guide them on what options they may have for when they rebuild their home or business.
And Director, using the term mitigation, a lot of people are not familiar with that, but really it's just doing all the steps necessary before the disaster to help maybe not have that disaster impact you as it could. Taking steps, preventative steps, to make sure that you and your family are going to be safe no matter what happens.
It is, Chris, and I'll bring us back to a bit of a leveling. Our first death in Kentucky for COVID was March the 6th. We're at that anniversary. After COVID began, we had two disasters. In 2021, we had the ice storm, the flood, then the tornado, and then we were just declared for the January 1st outbreak of 10 additional tornadoes. Mm-hmm. Kentucky is is not unaccustomed to disasters. We need to urge everyone within viewing distance to make that plan. And as Mike indicated and John furthered, it doesn't matter what the event is, whether it's a flood, a tornado, wildfire, whatever the case may be. If you have a plan, you can adjust the plan to whatever the disaster is coming. The other part of mitigation that is a positive, from every FEMA declaration, and this will be a large one for the Commonwealth, in terms of dollars that are reimbursed to our governments through county submissions, there's a percentage of dollars that are set aside for mitigation projects. And our recovery branch is reaching out to all 23 counties to make them aware of that those dollars are out there and to urge them to begin developing long-term projects. Some of them take several years to finish, but the project won't ever start if you don't plan it and make good use of that funding. So that's out there, and that will be coming to communities as they ask.
And Michael, I'm sure that your office has been getting a lot of requests for severe weather classes, training people how to, be more prepared for severe weather, because it's the old stoplight analogy where, there should be a traffic signal here because it's a dangerous intersection, and sometimes the signal doesn't go up until it's a fatality or something terrible happens. Oh yes, a light should go up here. So it's more reactive than proactive, but we're trying to get people to be more aware and be better prepared and be proactive instead of waiting for something to happen.
Absolutely. So every March, April, May timeframe, we offer spotter classes, severe weather classes to teach folks weather safety as well as how to identify storm structure. So if you're outside and see clouds that look scary, you'll be able to know what you're looking at to take the proper precautions. It was already mentioned that, Kentucky is no stranger to disaster, and we work really hard with the Weather Service and partnering with FEMA and Kentucky Emergency Management to make ourselves as resilient as possible, but there's just no way we're going to make Kentucky weatherproof. But we can be weather ready, and we do that ahead of time with proper planning. Ready.gov is a great resource, step-by-step, what to do before, during, after events. You can also go to weather.gov/safety for more than just tornadoes, flooding, heat, cold, winter, snow, ice storms, that sort of thing, before, during, and after events. And it's a great resource as well for folks to check out and make plans now while the weather is somewhat quiet.
And that's the thing, the takeaway that we are wanting you at home from this program. We want you to know that Kentucky has just about everything. I mean, there are a few things that we don't, but as you just saw, and as you pointed out, Director, it just within a matter of months, we've gone from big ice, big snow, tornadoes twice, floods. Kentucky's notorious for flooding.
Absolutely. It's our number one killer.
It is the number one killer in the state of Kentucky.
We flood 12 months a year in Kentucky.
Yes. And it's a big problem because we've got one side of the state that's flat, the other side of the state where you've got hills and valleys and you get runoff. And it's a matter of knowing where you are, knowing where you live, knowing things like the way rivers run and streams run. And yes, that road floods anytime it comes a big rain. I should not cross over a flooded roadway. It is just, we live in a society now and a culture that is impatient. We have to admit it. We all get impatient. I'm just trying to get home. I've lived on this road for 30 years. I know how deep the water is. Well, you're assuming a lot when you do that, and you're taking your life and you're taking others' lives in your hand if you've got a family. Then if you get stuck or you get in a situation where you have to be rescued, you're getting first responders involved. You're getting eventually Kentucky Emergency Management involved. You're getting a lot of people involved to where you made that one mistake and you didn't plan and you didn't prepare. And now you see what happens. It's a domino effect.
Folks often underestimate the power of moving water. It only takes a minimum of 6 inches to knock an adult off their feet and 12 inches to move a car, four-wheel drive or not, off the roadway. So water is incredible, the power that it has, and folks should never cross fast-moving water.
Yeah, it's something, again, we assume that we think we can tackle, but it's not anything that you should. Tracy, bring you back in one more time before we go. Have you had a number of people in your community? I know that the main thing right now is just getting people back on their feet, getting businesses open again, trying to get people a place to live and a place to just where they can feel safe. But I know that you guys, and just knowing how you responded with this disaster, you're already thinking about what's next. You're already thinking, and your community is more than likely now more aware of what could happen, even though they thought maybe it's going to go somewhere else. Tell me the the temperament of those that are wanting classes, spotter classes, and wanting to be trained how to do this. And maybe you've had some people say, boy, I would love to be a first responder. I want to help in this kind of situation, should it ever happen again.
You know, I'd actually, with my husband being the fire chief of the volunteer, we've recently just had like 3 people sign up. Department and the other volunteer services are having people sign up. So there is a response out there for people to volunteer. I did last year. One of my goals when I took this job over, which is fixing to come up on my 3-year anniversary, is I want to do one of the FEMA classes, which is the Community Emergency Response Team program. And COVID kind of stepped me back. And last year I started and done my first class in the south end of the county. And we had about 35 to 40 actually finished the class. And they came out during the tornado and worked all night helping to the safety, checking houses and all that stuff. Things that they didn't think they'd actually ever do, they did. And so we have a high response to go ahead and start a class in the north end. So we're going to probably get that going in the next month and a half. And then we're looking at actually going into the school system and doing the CERT program for the teens. And so that's a FEMA program that's out there. And a lot of communities already have it going. And it's a great program. It teaches people basic first aid, how to, take care of yourself, your family, and then you check on your neighbors.
Yeah, because you're not going to be any good to anybody if you're tired, worn out. You've got to be able to take care of yourself, have some downtime, refocus, be fresh, get in there and do what needs to be done. And I tell you, Tracy, we are all here smiling at what you just said. And I know John is smiling because you mentioned taking the FEMA classes. CERT, is something that, everyday people can get involved in. We've got about 2 minutes left. Tell us briefly how people, if they want to volunteer, can be involved.
Well, and Tracy brings up a great, I appreciate the shout out to FEMA, but that wouldn't work without people like Tracy, publicizing it, putting it on and then socializing and then having those folks engage, as she just mentioned the night of. So my first recommendation would be, you can check the ready.gov, but contact your local emergency manager. There's probably a wealth of classes, volunteer opportunities out there for individuals, even if they're not FEMA courses, that they can provide help and do that neighbor helping neighbor action ahead of the next event. And
Director Dawson, I know you've always needed people, but now more than ever, you need people.
We do. It is a constant need, and volunteers are the backbone of what we do. The folks in our world, in our business, realize that out of bad things, many times come good things. And I will tell you, out of the Western Kentucky tornado event comes a renewed resilience in Kentuckians. It's neighbor helping neighbor, counties helping counties, a resilience that is well needed, and I'm proud to be associated with everybody involved in this response.
And Michael, I know that you need spotters. You need people to call you when there is something that's happening weather-wise in the community. Radar cannot see everything.
Hey, radar's great, but it does have its limitations too. And we really love our eyes on the ground. Pictures, phone calls, we're on social media. Find your local office and please share your photos. We love them.
All right. Well, I just, this has been illuminating. I hope for you at home, it has been just that. I want to again thank John Brogan, the Federal Coordinating Officer for FEMA, being one of our guests tonight. Michael Kochasik, Warning Coordinating Meteorologist for the Louisville National Weather Service. Michael Dossett, retiring. Sir, we thank you for your service at Kentucky Emergency Management and the years that I've gotten to know you. Thank you so much for, this is not your first time on the show, so thank you for being here again. And of course, Tracy Warner in Mayfield. Thank you, Tracy, for taking time. I know you're busy, but being with us tonight and your stories that you shared from Mayfield, just heartbreaking, but you just know that we are with you. Okay?
Thank you.
Yes. All right. Well, to help with relief efforts for the Western Kentucky tornadoes, please visit ket.org/Kentucky tornadoes. There you can make a donation if you want to. And on behalf of all of us here tonight, we send our deepest sympathies to everyone who suffered loss from these storms and the communities who are still and will be putting the pieces back together. Stay Kentucky strong. Thank you for joining us.